Let's do this.
It's time for Hangin' with Langan.
I like that she's got a big dirty mouth that gets her in trouble.
Wow.
Stop me, 'cause I'm having a good time.
Hey, thanks for hanging with Langan. I am Maureen Langan, and you know the routine on Hanging with Langan. I chat with cool people from academics to alcoholics and everyone in between. If you can watch it live here on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, the Hanging with Langan group page on Facebook, but also any of the major audio platforms, even ones I've never heard of. You can listen to it there. Just go to my podcast page on maureenlangan.com and you'll see all the many ways in which you can listen. I know I look like I've been arrested with this background. If you're watching this, it's because I'm at my parents' house and I had to find a room where the internet works. But it's very serious times right now with what's going on in the world, this horrific situation in Ukraine. So I wanted to understand more about it. I want to understand more about the relationship over the years with Russia and Ukraine. Remember, we used to call it the Ukraine, but it's Ukraine. So who would I invite on to talk about this? I mean, come on, who else is there to invite on other than the Hangin' with Langan official historian himself, Mr. Professor to you, Peter Bales.
All right. Thank you, Maureen, for having me. I am the official historian of Hangin' with Langan. And
Yes.
boy, we're making history. We are making history every day, it seems. We're living is what we're doing.
Somebody said we are right now living in the newsreels that we used to watch back in the day of
Right.
World War II. What I want to say, right as we record this, everything is very fluid and moving right now. What we're talking about right now may not be happening when people are listening to this in an hour or 5 hours. So let's get to this. My understanding of Ukraine, it's existed for 80 skillion years before Jesus ever walked the earth. That land has always been there. And in recent centuries, my understanding has gone back and forth between the Soviet Union and Poland. You tell me, give us a short.
Oh, you're exactly right. It has existed for a long time. It's been constantly attacked and conquered. But in recent centuries, Ukraine was part of Russia, part of Poland. But the idea that it's not really a country is just wrong. It is a country. It is a culture. It is a language. They have a language that was suppressed for a long time by Russia and then the Soviet Union. Of course, the Soviet Union after World War II was so paranoid about their security, having been attacked so many times, Russia over the centuries, World War I, World War II most recently. They not only built up their own borders, but they wanted to control everything on their own borders. And so, of course, incorporated Ukraine into the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, if you remember the Beatles song Back in the USSR. And
when did that form? What year, around what time frame did the USSR form?
Well, my goodness, that's the Russian Revolution of 1918. As the Russians were losing World War I, they essentially surrendered a lot of their land to the Germans and then went about consolidating the Russian Revolution, which was communist all along. And that is when we first get the USSR, the Soviet Union. Everybody calls it Russia. Called it Russia because Russia is the strongest, most influential state with Moscow in it, right there in the middle. But of course, the Soviet Union is the only country, and now today, Russia, that spans two continents. It's in Europe and Asia at the same time. Remarkably big, and most of its history oriented toward Europe. Okay, and because that's where the money is. And that's where you can sell your raw materials, which the Soviet Union and Russia has always had a lot of. And the Ukraine has a lot of raw materials as well. But, since the breakup of the Soviet Union, 1990, 91, 92, Ukraine doesn't want to be a part of a Russian empire. They want to be part of Europe. They want to be part of the West. They want to be part of capitalism, not kleptocracy. And they want to assert their own language and their own culture. And that's always really frustrating. That's,
Well, can I tell you what I'm trying to understand? And this is why I've always thought NATO is so vastly important, because for those who don't know NATO, basically what I think is how I translate it. Group of countries have gotten together after World War II, said Russia will never be an imperialist force to take us over. So if they attack one, they attack all. So it's one for all for one. We're a family. We may have our differences, but we're together. Would that be accurate or not?
I love that. You sound like the Three Musketeers. All for one, one for all. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, formed after World War II for exactly what you said, to protect the West against the Soviet Union. Do you remember the Soviet Union created the Warsaw Pact to counter NATO? But the Warsaw Pact didn't have any money. It was basically just the Soviet Union propping up its puppets. Uh, but NATO has been successful. And when the Soviet Union broke apart in the early 90s, the big question was, well, what's the purpose of NATO? The Soviet Union has broken apart. And that question was not answered until just a few days ago, when Putin and Russia attacked Ukraine, because now clearly NATO is revitalized. The last thing that Putin wanted, he did. He really miscalculated in this attack on Ukraine. NATO, which he thought might splinter because of this attack, has united over this attack.
Okay. So, Professor Peter Bales, the official historian of Hangin with Langan, we're here. We're talking
Favorite
about
student,
Ukraine.
Maureen Langan, in the back. I'm
Okay.
calling on you. Go ahead.
When do I graduate? So, I've been in your class a long time. What I want to understand about Ukraine, forever seeking its own autonomy, its own culture, its own language, its own people, why did it not, once it was severed from the Soviet Union, had its independence, why did it not become part of NATO?
Good question. And I will try to answer it. As the Soviet Union broke up, we go through the 90s and into the 2000s, and a lot of countries in Eastern Europe that were former satellites, former puppets of the Soviet Union,
Such as?
such as Poland, such as the Baltic states, wanted to join NATO and indeed did join NATO. Now, Ukraine is right on the border with Russia. And I think NATO moved slowly on that to avoid antagonizing
Right.
Vladimir Putin and Russia, which of course is a nuclear power.
Mm-hmm.
But NATO can't be told by Russia that Ukraine can't join. NATO
Right.
and the countries that want to join will make the decision about who joins NATO. Not someone saying, no, you can't join NATO. And Putin, of course, is completely threatened by the idea of a NATO country.
Sure, because it's a Western alliance, we're all
Right.
aligning. And it sounds to me like you're saying that we, meaning NATO, were hesitant to be more assertive about brokering a relationship with Ukraine
Well,
toward NATO.
it takes years, and it was moving forward. And as we're leading up to this Ukrainian invasion by Russia, you would say that NATO membership for Ukraine could be talked about in terms of years, not months, not weeks, not days, years. But everyone has always known that Putin would find that an unacceptable threat. And with Ukraine moving so forward toward the West economically and possibly joining NATO, he thought this was the time was ripe to attack and literally take the country by force, because he can, like it was a century gone by, like Hitler did, like Napoleon did, like Genghis Khan did back in centuries of old. And this is 2022, and the world is shocked because you can't just take a neighboring country.
Well, apparently you can. Apparently
Well,
you can.
And he did take the Crimea, which was part of Ukraine, in 2014.
Did we do anything about that?
No,
Or were we just like, enjoy yourself, take what you need?
token sanctions and a lot of criticism, but no. A lot of Russian speakers, people of Russian culture in Crimea, no objection from the population, really.
Okay.
But this is a whole different thing because these are ethnic, which do exist, Ukrainians. And to Putin's surprise, the world is standing up united. I mean, even Switzerland, which is traditionally neutral, has agreed to join the sanctions. Interesting, the countries that are not joining the sanctions, and that, of course, would be China, who
China,
are
yeah.
trying to soft talk this because they still want business with the West, but they also are allied in some sense with Russia. Disappointingly, India is being very sort of soft and non-committal, making a little, oh, let's hope everybody makes peace, that kind of thing. And of course, Syria, which is a client state of Russia, is not on board. But, and of course, what are you going to hear from North Korea? But aside from that, and the Arab world is again calling for peace, but not jumping on board with sanctions. But the rest of the world, uh, if you want to go to the bathroom, you don't have to ask. You can,
I'm raising my hand if you're listening on the
oh,
podcast
okay.
because he
All
has
right.
so much great information, but I have like 8 million questions
Okay,
and
ask me
I get
questions.
very excited.
That's not going to
No,
be.
no, I love all the stuff you're saying. You're making points, so I don't want to interrupt you. Ukraine did not become part of NATO, but because, well, you said they were on track to hopefully
Yes, I think they
becoming
will.
part of it. But they did consider themselves, they weren't in the EU either, or were they?
No, but they have requested membership in the EU just a couple days ago, and if they survive as an independent country, we have to see what happens. That may
Yeah.
happen in the not too distant future as well.
Well, I was reading part of the history, not, just glazing over not glazing, just, doing a quick sweep. One of the things that stood out to me in the history of Ukraine is how Russia at the time said that the Ukraine is Stalin. It's a collective. Therefore, they can't own their land. Therefore, they have to be basically tenant farmers on their land. And these Ukrainians, it reminds me so much of the Irish. Like they starved them. They made them have a quota of producing a certain amount of whatever. I don't know if it's wheat or whatever you produce on Ukrainian lands, and that they would slaughter their own animals and give it to Russia. This tough thing, like, yeah, I will cut my nose to spite my face if it means you don't get anything. And just how so many were starved. I didn't realize it was a genocide similar
It
to
was
the
a
Irish
genocide.
potato famine.
It was Stalin and a deliberate famine that he caused. And we need to remember that in history. They say it could be a
I didn't even
million
know it.
died in this famine. And your analogy to the potato famine for the Irish is perfect. It's Stalin, communism, a complete failure. And believe me, Ukraine wants to turn away from anything like that. Wants to turn away from Russia, of course, understandably because of their history, and be their own country and be part of the world community. That's what they want, and that's what Putin
Yeah.
is threatened by.
But see, I
Right
want
on
to
the
get to,
border.
we're going to
Right
get
on-
to the superhero Zelensky soon in a moment. But I wanted to set a lot of this up because I think it's important. But one of the reasons I understand that Ukraine is left without certain really nuclear or mass weapons is because there was part of a treaty that was agreed upon, I think, between the US and Russia. At some point, there was some kind of agreement that the US was in that would keep Ukraine for its autonomy, not to have certain bad weapons.
I think
How's
everybody
that?
was so happy to have the Soviet Union break up. And what are we going to do with these nuclear weapons that are around the Soviet Empire? Ukraine gave up voluntarily its nuclear weapons to Russia. So
Mhm,
did Belarus. And Belarus is now a puppet state, essentially, of
mhm.
Russia and will be taking back nuclear weapons on their land right above Ukraine. But Ukraine voluntarily gave up its nuclear weapons. And maybe
Yeah.
rethinking that, but it was
You
like
know,
a rush of world events after the fall of the Soviet Union, and of course, Russia got them all.
we talk about there's a resilience we're seeing firsthand in the people of Ukraine. We are watching this from the top throughout the country. And I get emotional, as does every interpreter who's trying to interpret Zelensky's words. Do you hear these interpreters? There's a man crying,
Yeah.
woman, their voices are breaking. This man is a superhero. what he is doing, people call it Churchwellian or however you call. What do you make of him? Let's get your take,
Well,
historian,
first of all, he used to be a comedian, so that speaks extremely well of
to
him.
his intelligence, yes,
His intelligence.
or not. Maybe a waste of time for a while. Who knows?
Well, actually, I believe comedians to be successful need to be intelligent, even if they're playing dumb on stage. They're playing dumb at the height of their intelligence. So I really believe that his being a comedian is terrific, and now he's a world leader, and he's been inspiring. He's found his moment. He's found his voice. People, not only in Ukraine but around the world, are responding to him.
Mhm.
A couple days ago, I went to a protest outside of the Russian diplomatic compound on Long Island in Glen Cove with many, many, many Ukrainian Americans singing Ukrainian songs. Uh, it was very moving. Ukrainian songs, and then one more song, and that song was "God Bless America." Incredible
Take
moving.
it.
I'm telling
Oh,
you, because and they're asking for the United States to help. The United States, I believe, is helping. But you also were wondering about how come the United States is not maybe establishing a no-fly zone or sending troops into Ukraine.
well, I know why they're not sending troops into. Go
Okay,
ahead. You
because
tell. You
because
talk about that.
well, because it would be the U.S. fighting Russia and the potential for World War III. And World War
Right.
III would
Right.
be nuclear, and we could the entire
No.
planet die. So we don't want
Yeah.
to go
No, I hear a lot of people asking that question. I'm aware of why we're not going in there because it will be World War III. I'm wondering if it's going to come to that regardless because of what Putin's doing. And we can't go in there unless it's an agreement. Well, if it's not okay, here, this is a good question. We know that if it's NATO, it's one for all for one. You heard a NATO state, you heard all of us, we're going to protect each other. But if the US, could the US, just hypothetically, could they go into Ukraine if we decided to. We're just like, let's do it. We're going to protect them. Is that something we
Right,
could do?
we didn't have any mandate, any legal authority from the United Nations or from NATO to go into Iraq searching for
Mhm.
non-existent weapons of mass destruction. The United States can do anything that it deems necessary for its security or its interests. I mean,
Mhm.
the
Oh,
ultimate
okay.
foreign policy making body for the United States is the Congress. The
Mhm.
Congress. And the president, of course, is the commander in chief. But the Congress has the ultimate authority for making war if they want to exert it. But if it's controversial or a tough vote, they're not going to say anything, as was the case in the invasion of Iraq. Yes, the United States is the most powerful nation militarily in the world. Don't kid yourself. And we can do anything we want. But is it best for us? Is it best for the world? Is it the right thing
Right,
to do?
right,
Those are considerations. We don't need the UN. We don't need NATO. But in NATO, we're committed. Maureen, we're committed. We signed the UN Charter in 1945. NATO was created a few years later. We are a member of that. We are committed to protecting members of NATO. So if Putin goes against the Baltic states or Poland, Poland is in NATO. We are committed to be there. Is that the beginning of World War III,
well,
or
this
has
is the thing.
we would have to do something? And apparently we're trying to avoid World War III by going into Ukraine. But where is Putin going next? Moldova?
I was just about to bring up Moldova. I hear he's going to get Moldova.
Well, that's his next obvious tempting target. Also, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland. Those are the countries that people are concerned about. The wannabe dictator in Hungary is getting in on the sanctions and criticizing this attack
Yeah.
on Ukraine because he doesn't want his country
When we
overrun.
talk about the Baltic states, and now Poland used to lean much more like democratic. They've shifted
Well, Poland
to
is
another.
backsliding into authoritarianism,
Yeah,
sadly, but it's not
there.
Soviet. It's not Russian.
Yeah.
It's still Poland.
Were the
So,
Baltic states at one point, forgive me, I forget, were they, and I want to be clear, were they part of the
yes,
Soviet Union? All three,
yes,
Estonia,
yes.
Lithuania, and Latvia. Okay. Okay. So
And
let's talk
Putin
about,
wants them back. And boy, if I was in one of those countries, I'd be pretty darn worried about where Putin's going next. But the point is, at this date and time, I don't know when our audience is watching this, but we are inspired that Ukraine is still holding out, fighting valiantly, and the attack has not gone as well as Russia thought it would go. And I'm thinking, has this been difficult enough for Putin in Russia that he's not going to go for his obvious next targets, the Baltic states or Moldova or Poland? That's what we're hoping right now.
All right, you know
That
what I'm hoping right now, Professor Peter Bales? We're talking
what?
about the Ukraine, not the Ukraine. I, as of this recording, I pray that Zelensky is alive. I I just pray that he continues to be alive. That's what my hope is. I just watched that man's bravery, and from what I'm understanding, he does embody that tough, proud, the Ukrainian people. He's number one target. What are the chances that he survives this, and how? Because we are here watching all of this, and we can't get involved because we don't want World War III. We're involved. We're getting ammunition and things to them through back doors. I know that. And these people are as tough as hell, but Putin's ego, he will friggin' continue to destroy cities in the country he wants. He's destroying it. It's like a Pyrrhic victory. What are you getting from this?
Yeah, once he takes it over, he's going to have an occupying army there. There, some people say that once Ukraine falls, that's when the real war begins, because they're going to have guerrilla warfare, and they're going to
Mhm.
be in places where the Russians aren't, fighting back and supplied by the West. And it's going to be hell for Putin. And what I think is, at least he will think about going after his next targets and triggering World War III by going further west, because of
Ugh.
how difficult this has gone. That's what everybody's hoping. But Ukraine is just in a horrible position, because where are they going to be a year from now? I mean, it's nice to think about this romantic, valiant fight they're putting up. Incredible bravery. I admire Zelensky so much, and you and I are both comedians as well, and
Mhm.
sometimes you can express things in through comedy. And I just thought of this as you were talking about Zelensky's bravery. He's being more brave now and facing more now than he ever faced on a Friday night second show.
You
And every comedian watching me knows exactly what I'm talking about.
sorry,
Um,
can I please just tell I mean, I know we use humor. If you don't know, as a comedian, the
it is.
worst night is Friday, the second show. Everybody's tired from their work. They hate you. You don't know why they're there. And you're like, why do I do comedy? So he's equating that this is the toughest thing Zelensky's ever done. And he's done second night shows on a Friday. I mean, this is our dark humor. It's so insane.
Oh,
Go ahead.
uh, where are they going to be? How is Ukraine going to come back? I mean, the odds are so against them, and it's just so great to see them fighting, and you hope that they can hold on. But how do you get out of this at this point? How do you get the Russians out of the country? How can Ukraine be a country again and start moving forward and do what they want to do, which is
But how can they? Will they? This is the whole thing. Will they? I'm thinking of it, you brought it up, like an occupying force, much like the British in Ireland. And it's going to be guerrilla warfare, and it's going to be man on the street, and it's going to be soldiers around a corner and a Molotov cocktail there. And here we go again.
here we go again. I Molotov cocktails, guerrilla fighting. Uh, and by the way, you don't spell guerrilla fighting like gorilla in the zoo. It's two R's, two L's. It's when the population is, you can't tell who's fighting you, as opposed to who's just some innocent person in the general population, like the Viet Cong that drove the United States so crazy during
Um,
Vietnam.
One thing I wanted to
And
bring up, well, there's
Russians,
many
that's
things.
going to happen to the Russians. And will Putin fall? There's You can barely say there are even cracks now. Oh, some oligarchs are upset they might lose their mansions and their yachts overseas. Is there anyone who can talk to this guy? He's isolated from his advisors. He likes to sit at the end of a long table,
Mhm.
about a half a mile wide and long, away from his advisors and from foreign visitors like Macron from France.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody who You can't predict what's going to happen. Nobody can predict. They can act like they can predict, but I think everybody is just praying for Ukraine and to survive. These brave people. Some
That,
Ukrainian men going back into the country. to
Well,
fight.
that's it. The strength and the bravery and watching fathers and
And
husbands
women,
drop off.
men and women are fighting. Let's
Oh,
be
oh, of course, yes, men and women. Let's be clear on that. Yes, there's a lot of yes, absolutely. I watch husbands and fathers drop off their families at the border and have to turn around. It's just heartbreaking. What I one article I read, it was an older article in the Washington Post, and they were quoting Zelensky meeting with the Prime Minister Benjamin. Yeah, how do I Benjamin
Benjamin
Netanyahu?
Netanyahu.
Yeah, easy name for me to say.
Just call him
And
Ben.
Benji. So he was talking to Benji, and he talked about how his people that stood out during the Holocaust. He talked about a priest who saved children, and he talked about a Muslim woman who saved scores of children. And then he told the story about four brothers, three of whom were killed by the Nazis. All one of the brothers survived. That was his grandfather. His grandfather survived, and now he, Zelensky himself, is the president of Ukraine. And that is so beautiful and so emotional. Do you think they'll kill him if they find him, won't they?
I don't know. They may not want to create a
More
martyr
harm?
greater than a
Oh, okay.
martyr, even greater than he is now. I don't know. It would be such a public relations disaster to have him killed. Let's see what happens.
Public relations disaster.
Even
I
more
think
so
that
than they
ship
have now.
has sailed. Oh, and I hope his family, I know they're in hiding. Supposedly they are in Ukraine hiding. I want them to be somewhere very, very safe.
Yes, I
Mm.
think we all agree. And this is quite a moment in world history. What's going to happen? What's going to happen with Russia? I think it's clear that the old Russian Empire will never, never, ever be restored, Putin's dream. But what happens to this authoritarian, not communist anymore? It's really a kleptocracy where all the rich people do is just steal. Uh, what's going to happen? Um, let's find out. Hopefully, Putin will fall. You know,
I'm
but
reading, go ahead.
there's no
Will he
sign.
fall? How can he fall?
How
How can
can
he
he fall? The
possibly fall?
oligarchs turn against him. The Russian people are hurt so hard by these sanctions that they turn out against him. Authoritarian dictators fall. Mussolini, you could have said, "How's Mussolini ever going to fall?" Well, he fell. You know,
Yeah, I
and
gotcha.
Russia could have the same fate.
I'm reading. I have a friend who's a comedian who lives in St. Petersburg, Russia. Right now, the ruble, I understand, is worth less than a penny. A penny.
Wow.
That's what I heard. But he's posting about devastation, and he and I have performed together in South Africa and Switzerland. He's a brilliant bilingual performer, just brilliant. He did his comedy for one of the first times in English when I performed with him, and he just killed it. So his first name is Igor. I won't say more than that. But he was saying that, what can you do? You can help friends. I would like to note that donations to Ukrainian funds are equal to the state. It's hard for the translation on Facebook isn't great. He goes, cheating, you will get up to 20 years, but you can find ways to help specific friends and acquaintances. And he gives some details. It's just heartbreaking to me. So he had been traveling, and the day before Putin, you say it good, Putin went into, I want to call him Pukin. So Pukin went into, the day before he went into Ukraine, my friend Igor, I said, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, even though you're a communist country, I did say, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, what is happening? He goes, Maureen, I was just out of the country for 2 months with my family in Thailand. I just got back yesterday and had no idea of all this.
Oh my.
Can you imagine just
Oh
coming home to that? Wouldn't you have stayed out?
yeah.
Anyone?
He had no idea. He went back anyway.
Well, I don't think he knew until he got home. Who knows? Maybe he's under some kind of palm tree with your
Yeah.
family, and you gotta
Yeah.
get on it. And he's like, "Yeah, basically, yes. You're just doing your thing off
Yeah.
the radar. And he's a very informed man, and he's a very bright man. Who knows? You're out with your family, you're doing your thing. But anyway, they're putting people away for 20 years if you donate to help the Ukrainians. If you protest, even not 20 years, but something will happen. But he's saying, don't be afraid of jail, don't be afraid of a mental hospital. Here's what you can do that can avoid
Right.
those things
That's
for you.
terrific.
So
That's
God
terrific.
bless him, because you know what? My he's my Russian friend. He doesn't want this. And we have to remember Putin is hurting him and his family and his livelihood and the people all around him.
I remember a sign at the protest I went to: Russians do not want this war.
No.
And there were lots of American flags at the protest. There were lots of hands holding the American flag and hands holding the Ukrainian flag, shaking, holding each other together. It's very, very powerful. Many Ukrainian Americans were there. And I think Russia has made itself really a pariah in the Western world for our lifetimes. How do you come back from this? How does Putin he never will come back from this. He'll always be this horrible tyrant, evil. He's going down in history. He's joining Mussolini and Hitler and the
I just
guys,
want to know, yes, all those people.
all those
I'm
horrible.
one. Did Tucker Carlson join the Russian army? I was just wondering because I know he didn't. He was speaking like, "What did Russia ever do to us, and why do we have to be involved in
I
Ukraine?"
saw
So I just
that,
wondered.
saw what he said. Uh,
Just wonder if
horrible,
he's fighting.
horrible, unpatriotic, frankly, nonsensical. Maybe desperate loyalty to Trump. Trump, of course, was Putin's buddy. Trump sucked up to Putin. Trump admired authoritarians because he wants to be an authoritarian himself. Shocking that so many Republicans went along with Trump. But notice that the Republican Party, except for its really extreme right, is lining up behind the United States. And Maureen, traditionally, America in these times, we come together, we put
Yeah.
aside Republican,
Hmm.
Democrat, liberal, conservative.
Yeah.
Most Americans, by the way, are doing that, and
Yes.
the Fox people are realizing that, and now backpedaling and turning away from the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that they were saying the first couple of nights of the invasion. Horrible,
Well,
unspeakable. What they
watching Joe Biden's State of the Union, to watch everyone stand up as Americans just made me so happy. Just
right.
watching Republicans and Democrats, largely except one or two, getting up and supporting each other and supporting Ukraine. On a positive, I want to end this on a positive note. Uh, your wishes for the Ukrainian people, the best outcome that you can see.
The best outcome that I can see is that they keep fighting. The West continues to supply them. This becomes so difficult and untenable for the Russians that they announce that they've won as a face-saving gesture and withdraw, and Ukraine gets their country back with Zelensky as its president. And they continue to build their economy. They continue to build their modern, small d democratic society, interacting with the West, and that great Ukrainian people moves forward into the 21st century. That's what I want to have happen.
I hope you're right with that. I really hope you're right with that, Peter. I just want to see these people come back even stronger. Lord knows they're going to have to, given what they would have to deal with rebuilding a city, a country. I pray Zelensky survives, because when he survives, his people will survive and democracy will survive. That's how I see it. All right, you are a gem. When Professor Peter Bales is here, there's always something informative. He's going to be joining me next time. We're going to talk about the Japanese in America, the internment camps, what they went through. We're about just beyond the 80th anniversary of that. So you'll come back and we'll talk about that, right, Peter?
Yes,
All
absolutely.
right. So you guys, thank you for watching. Sometimes we have a lot of laughs here, a lot of fun, and sometimes more serious things are called for. And I thought it was very important to address this. Please follow me. Go to maureenlangan.com. And my podcast page is there, and it shows you all the ways that you can subscribe for free at Apple, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. You can go straight there. Give me a review on Apple. And of course, you can follow me here. Just join the Hangin with Langan Facebook group page. And we're always doing live interviews, chats with cool people, from academics to alcoholics, here on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. And if you want to support the show, a good way to do that is to go to patreon.com/Maureen Langan. That's all the videos, and it's subscriber based, starting at $5. Always available to put together a comedy show for you, host a corporate event, moderate it, whatever you need. Reach out. You can contact me through Maureen Langan And until we meet again, I wish everybody the best. I usually like to laugh. I feel quite emotional. All right, I will laugh. We will laugh again. Okay, bye, Wig. Mwah.
No, you cannot leave me like that.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, and feel free to share it with a friend.
Please don't go, please.
I'll be back.
Au revoir.